Good morning, everyone. I am here with another semi-unboxing and flip-through video. This is a deck I have wanted for actually quite a while, and I had actually given up on obtaining it because the first printing had sold out, and I wasn't aware that a second printing would be forthcoming. And then fairly recently, a second printing was announced. And weirdly, I was like, no, I really want the first printing because I don't actually remember why it was. I was like, no, I want the first printing, possibly because I'm just a nut. And I had sort of thought, oh, I can't get the first printing at all anymore, and I'm unwilling to wait for the second to show up at some point. But then I found that Little Red Tarot in the UK, here is their card, still had a handful of the first edition. Yes, this is my cat. He's contributing. Little Red Tarot still had a handful of the first edition decks available. And so I did get, first edition. I was able to get a copy of their stash from them, and I ordered a copy and got it sent to me, even with the pricey international delivery. And however, interestingly, my understanding is that the second edition box has the barcode, and it's the second edition box is actually slightly smaller so that the cards fit better in it, is how I understand it, but it's actually the barcode that sets it apart. So even though I trust the vendor to say that, yes, this is a first edition deck, I might actually have a second edition box. So I don't know. That's just kind of an interesting note about this copy that I have. So if I ever choose to part ways with this deck, that's something that I will want to note in this unboxing video, that yes, I do seem to have a legitimate first edition deck, but the box might not be a first edition box. I don't know. So anyway, it's a beautiful box. This is really well produced. It is a clamshell box. It's got the foil printing on it. It's very pretty. So one of the reasons I wanted this deck, aside from its artistic appeal to me, I like the art style a lot. It is very modern, it's very clean, it's very fresh. It's also very queer inclusive, but I'm not sure if it's fair to just call this a queer deck. Like, it's, oh, this is so pretty. It's a deck that includes queer people rather than it being a queer focused deck. And I think that is a helpful distinction to make. And here is the image that occurs on the back of the box. White and gold on black. Yeah, this is nice. And there's a magnetic seal. Yeah, that's a nice box. And here is the deck. Oh, the guidebook is chunky. Like, this is substantial. Yeah, I think there's a difference between there being a deck with queer content and a queer focused deck. And neither of that is shade to either focus, because I think there's place in a reader's collection and a reader's library for both these things. This is really cool. Yeah, as you can probably see from the pictures, this is a Rider-Waite-Smith inspired deck. I'm not sure if it's quite fair to say that this is a Rider-Waite-Smith clone, but perhaps that argument could be made if you wanted to be that way. This is really cool, but I like the modern take. I think that really speaks to a lot of the sensibilities of contemporary readers, but also contemporary queerance. There's a real fresh movement, I think, in the tarot community, and I think with regards to art in particular. And I find that really invigorating, which is why I'm so excited about some of the decks, and especially a lot of the independent decks. This is really cool. I like this book a lot. This little white book seems to have a lot of substance to it, and that makes me really excited to see what the artist has to say about the cards. So let's get into the deck itself. I chose the black/blue holographic edging because I'm that person. Yes, the gold is pretty. Yes, I actually had a really hard time choosing between the black and the white pearl holographic edging, but I don't have any black holographic edging in any of my cards, and I love this dark rainbow effect. I think it's beautiful, and I think it highlights these stunning colors. I'm actually surprised at how the cards feel. They have this cool, almost stone-like texture, like a grippy texture to them. They're grippy. They're not slippery, smooth, like a lot of tarot decks are, like especially the mass market decks are just slippery and slidey and like glass, like they just slide everywhere. These are gonna stay where you put them. Yeah, the texture is, I just want to keep my hands on them. So I'll be honest, it was really the art that drew me to this deck. And I've been kind of avoiding a lot of Kickstarter projects for the past several months because, well, I've been broke, like all of us. And that's why you haven't seen a lot of deck videos from me, is because I've been too broke to buy decks. And Kickstarter was not being really friendly to a lot of its employees. And I'm like, well, I'm just not going to support Kickstarter projects then, even though it was a very, very difficult choice to make because I want very badly to support the artists and the people behind the projects. And I want to support the projects and I want to see them in the world. But I also ethically feel like I can't support a company that doesn't treat its people right. So it seems to have improved somewhat, and so I think I will be supporting strategically projects again, and that makes me a little happier. And so hopefully I can get back on the crowdfunding bandwagon a little bit. But I was happy that this artist made this deck available on their own, so that you could buy it directly from her, and that there were a number of boutiques and vendors that you could get this deck from directly, like Little Red Tarot and probably some others, but I think it sold out fairly quickly. I think there was a lot of buzz around this one, and for good reason. Like, this is a really cool modern themed deck, and the cards are definitely stuck together a little bit. And one of the other reasons that I was very intrigued by this deck was the inclusion of a lot of people of color. I think that's also a very important part of modern tarot art, because we're not just reading for white people, and having visible inclusion in our tools is, especially when tarot is such a visual medium, like this is not a small issue in tarot art, and it's been treated as a non-issue for such a long time, and it's an overdue issue, and it's been treated as something not even worth talking about for decades, and longer than that if we want to talk about the history of tarot. And so making this a deliberate inclusion and making decks that focus even exclusively on people of color is really exciting. I really like seeing tools that speak specifically to the desire of people who want to use them. I think that's refreshing and exciting and invigorating. And it shows us that for a tool that you think, oh, we've seen everything in tarot. No, we haven't. We can still find new and interesting and worthwhile and innovative, conversation-worthy ways of exploring this tool that we thought we knew. Oh, that's really part of what keeps tarot so interesting to me. But of course, it's never just the art that makes a divination deck a useful tool, because it is a very personal thing, and it really, I think, doesn't always show up at the very beginning. Oh, I like that dog, I like that child, I like that happy son. There's 2 dogs in this. Oh, that's really cool. There's the puppy. Do you see the little... You can kind of see it there. The light's not great here. Maybe I should open one of the curtains. But I don't want to blast us with oversaturation, so maybe not. Here. This is what we're here for. That's awesome. Yeah, sometimes you start out with a deck and it's your best friend and it is your go-to. Oh, isn't she glorious? Oh, such a simple card. The World is sometimes a card where it gets loaded up. Like, oh, we just load up the world. And it, as it should be, because it's the World. And it's all in there. But so simple, so direct. Oh, she's beautiful. This is so beautiful. Oh, I like this card. Okay, so here we are in the minors. And it looks like the suits, the minor suits, are heavily color-coded, which I think is not a novel take, but I do like that you can kind of tell at a glance what suit you're looking at. So we've got the fiery wands, and we've got the flowering, the fruitful and lively wand in a very direct and obvious way. It's not a subtle flowering wand. Oh, this is cute. It's the station wagon. Look at that. And this person has a map. That's really cool. Yeah, and I don't know, taking it back to what I was saying, you can start out with a deck and it's your best friend and it's your ride or die, and you use it and find that it's not the deck that changes, it's you that changes. And I read with the Goddess Tarot by Chris Walter for, oh gosh, I don't even know. I read with it for a very long time, and it's because I loved the artwork, and I still love the artwork. I encountered the Book of Goddesses when I was fairly young, probably junior high. I don't know. So that was like the mid 90s or something. I think around the time it was first published. And I fell in love with that artist's art. Like, I loved it. Loved it. And so when she released a whole tarot deck, my gosh, I ate it up. That was my favorite deck. I loved it so much. I loved the Egyptian suit and the Norse suit and the majors in that deck. Oh gosh, I loved that deck. I read with it so much all the time. That was like my only deck. I had that one, and then at some point I acquired, of course, you know, the Rider-Waite Smith. And like, I sort of read with that occasionally, but I didn't really like it all that much. But like, you have one because you have one. And eventually at some point I was given an old copy, like the 78 or 68 edition of the Rider-Waite Smith. And so like, I had a couple copies of that, but I didn't read with them really. I only read with the Goddess Tarot. And at some point I realized it was too simplistic. I don't know. There was something about me as a reader that had grown or like outgrown that deck. Like, I had changed as a reader, and it wasn't accommodating me anymore. And I had acquired actually several decks because I worked at a bookstore and I worked at, I don't know, like I lived and worked in a major city, and so I had access. Yeah, I lived and worked in a major city. I had access to tons of decks, and I kept experimenting and trying and hoping to find a new deck that would fit me, and I really couldn't. It sometimes takes a very long time to find a deck that suits. And I actually don't remember what I read with after parting ways with the Goddess Tarot. And in a fit of early 20s melodramatics, I believe I cremated that deck and just released it to the flames. And I don't think I regret not keeping its physical embodiment, because I really wouldn't have used it. I really wouldn't have, because I really seriously outgrew it. I think I used my Rider-Waite Smith deck for a long time after that, just because I didn't have any other that really appealed. So this is interesting. We have some, we have our traditional court cards, and we have some that are ambiguously gendered, like it doesn't matter what their gender are, or that we just simply cannot tell. We have one that appears traditionally gendered, or that can be interpreted as traditionally gendered. And we have one that is divorced from the traditional gender attribution. And I think that's actually really interesting, because that says that the rank of the court card is not necessarily connected to the gender that is depicted. So it is a role that is played, not necessarily any kind of defining characteristic of a person. And I know that often that is how court cards are read. And we use court cards sometimes to say, oh, this person is characterized by this hair color, this eye color, this kind of behavioral traits. And these are often how court cards are read, or how they appear in layouts or in spreads, and to help pinpoint their dynamics within a layout. But they also don't have to be. And I think it's really interesting to show that behavioral traits are not necessarily connected to the position of a card within a deck. Like these things are not connected. Just like the star is not a gender, if that makes any sense. The king is not a gender. It is simply the position of a card within a deck. And I think starting to separate that, at least in terms of some decks, I think that's actually a really refreshing move. I love the color schemes in this. The lotuses, the lilies, the coffee cup, the mug shape, but also just the lines, the dynamic, the artistic layout. I really, it's beautiful. It's really lovely. But there's also this very traditional touch of the hand of fortune, the swirling clouds, the long lines. Oh, yeah, this is nice. If you've watched some of my other videos, you'll know that that kind of my general go-to deck is now Tarot of the Sweet Twilight. And I like that deck because it's very, very intuitive. It really demands a lot of intuitive prowess. It requires me to be very tuned in on an intuitive level, because even though it utilizes many traditional tarot symbolism, tarot symbols, and tarot dynamics, it kind of goes straight for a person's unconscious. And it talks a lot about process, and it talks a lot about what's going on inside a person's mind. And And that's a challenge. Well, not a challenge in the sense that it's hard, but it's a challenge to the person. It asks questions. It challenges you to say, what's really going on? What wool are you pulling over your own eyes? That's what I mean by it's a challenge. This deck is a challenge to your garbage, to your bullshit. And that's what I like about it. But it's not a tool for every purpose. And it's a little bit, the art is a little bit psychedelic. It's a little dreamscapey. And so it's a little off-putting, I think, to a lot of people. And so I like having a variety of art styles. Because I read for a variety of people. And sometimes having art that does not challenge is sometimes the right choice. Oh, this is a really cool take on this card. Possibly because choosing a plant to take home is that's the challenge I've had to face sometimes. But it's not just that, because we see the symbols appearing in the different planters. So it's still there. The symbols are still there. Here, let me kind of flex some of these cards to get them unstuck. That's really cute. Here's our page. Here's our knight. I wonder if all the knights have motorcycles. That would be an interesting interpretation. And here's a repeat of the tiny crown symbol. This card, the person depicted here, actually reminds me of someone I know. So this is another one of the decks that I bought, not exactly sight unseen. I did look at the artist's website to see the pictures of the whole deck that she has available. And, but you know, I didn't look through super duper duper close at each and every card. I looked through enough to get what I felt was a pretty good sense of the spirit of the deck and the colors, the composition, the line, the things that communicate the meaning, the meaning of the art to me, rather than really studying a lot of the individual cards. I didn't really watch any walkthroughs or anything like that. I guess I'm not a real considered shopper. I see enough to make my mind up, I guess. And if I have to waffle that much that I have to like consider every single card, that tells me that I don't need that deck, or that deck is not for me. If I have to think that hard about it, I know or I don't. And you do make mistakes. Sometimes it takes getting to know a deck for a while, and you discover that it really isn't what you're going to need, or you grow out of it, or it grows out of you, or your reading style changes, or the people you work with change. A lot of things can change, which I think was the point of my whole rambling story about my first best friend deck, my Goddess Tarot deck. And I absolutely don't regret reading with it. That was an incredible experience to have really bonded with one particular deck for so many years. Now, the colored background changes very slightly from the suit of swords to the court of swords. The suit of swords is slightly more gray-green, and this is more of a sea green, mint green, seafoam green. Ah, this Queen of Swords is delightful. I love her. I love that chair. Oh yes, I've seen this card before. We love him. And now the Pentacles. Wait, oh, that's the two, yes. Okay. This is interesting. It's outside of, it's not in the church as is traditional in the Rider-Waite-Smith. It's not even inside a building. It's out. It appears to be out of doors. So that's an interesting variation. And this one remains fairly similar. I've been starting to think that maybe one of the reasons I've been curious about so many new decks is because on some level I'm starting to look for a new... My cat is scratching his chin, and so my whole table is shaking. He's an earthquake. Frank, stop. Has he stopped? He is not. He's doing it again. There it goes. Okay. Now he stopped. Yeah, I wonder if on some level I'm looking... See, I love her dress. This is such a great take on this card. I love this card. She's gorgeous, and her outfit is fantastic. Yeah, I wonder if on some level I'm hoping for a new deck that will find me somehow. And I think definitely the Moon Power Tarot is very much filling that role on some level, but I'm not ready to move on from my Sweet Twilight. Because in also a very real way, I'm not looking for a new deck. I feel very, very fulfilled by Sweet Twilight. But maybe it's not a matter of needing or wanting or, I don't know, desiring one single deck. Maybe I'm not in a point in my life where one single deck is going to be my primary go-to or anything like that. Oh, it's a jackalope. How sweet. Oh my gosh. More jackalopes in tarot. Interesting take on this card. I don't know how I feel about it. Interesting. Okay. I would have to work with this card a little bit. Okay, so let's look at the back. Here's this design again, black and white. And we'll do a shuffle when I get everything lined back up again. So I think one of the reasons this card is challenging me is because we can't really see his face. It is very opaque. The eyes are blocked off, as well as the facial hair is really obscuring his expression. And he's set back in the plane of view. Like he's back from the front of the frame. And even his face is further back because his feet and his knees, even the knees are in the front of the plane of view. So his knees are forward. His knees are at the very front of the plane of view of where his body is set. And so his head and his face are the furthest back for his body. And so he's very remote. His face is very, very remote. And so you can't see him. His face is very closed off, and that's what's so challenging. Like, who is he, and where is he, and what is his expression? So that's what's so challenging, I think, for me about that card, is what is his expression and who is he? There's nothing there for me to see or read, and that's a strange take, because usually you can see his eyes. I mean, he's not necessarily making eye contact with you or anything, but you can see his eyes in the King of Pentacles. So that's an unusual variation on the King of Pentacles. Anyway, so let's put these back. But the white sunglasses, so the eye is lazy, and it will naturally tend to look at white space. And so your eye is drawn to the spaces where his eyes should be, even though his face is set furthest back from in all of his body. But there are no eyes there, which is different, even though many of the human figures in this deck have closed eyes or eyes that don't necessarily let you see where they're pointing, anything like that. You can't see his eyes, and they're just these blank white spaces. It looks like the Temperance card was stuck together with Death, so I'll make sure I let you see that, because it's gorgeous. The iced coffee and the hot coffee. Absolutely lovely. I have to make sure they're in proper order before I shuffle them. Yeah, the texture of these cards is fantastic. it might make shuffling just a little bit challenging for me because I have some hand weakness, but we will see. We will see. Okay, I can't wait to try. Look at those dark rainbows. Oh no, this is fun. Oh, this is just fine. Oh, it's fine. Like even the card size is okay for me. Yeah, they're a little stiff because they're brand new, like literally just out of the box. You saw me take them out, but oh no, they shuffle just fine. Like the thickness is perfect. Someone who knows tarot chose this cardstock. Oh gosh, this is nice. Oh, this is so gorgeous to shuffle. So yeah, my little device keeps running out of memory and I keep having to delete photos, and that's not gonna cut it for much longer. So anyway, yes, clearly I like this deck a lot. And if you also like this deck and it's awesome art, it's pretty rainbows, then here, let me, oh, there is our friend here. You can find, just by Googling This Might Hurt Tarot, you can also Google the artist's name. You can find copies currently available at Little Red Tarot. I don't know how much longer first edition copies might be available from this website. I purchased it early in 2020, but the second edition will be available also. And I believe it's an open edition, so there's no rush to purchase it before it runs out, anything like that. So have fun, shop for decks, support the artist, and I will catch you next time. Bye.